Good afternoon once again, and we were discussing the technologies that were enabling cloud into the existence. So, as part of our discussion, previously we discussed like a virtualization technology, data center technology, internet bandwidth, and architecture we had discussed previously. And now, going forward, we will discuss the web technology. I once again repeat our perception before going running into the discussion. See, we will not be deeply discussing what the web technologies are and how these will be helpful, blah blah. Other things we'll not be discussing. Okay, we'll be only looking into the components of these web technology that helps cloud to exist. That is it. And what features of web technology help the cloud into the existence. That's what we are interested about. Okay, so our perception will be very limited. I once again repeat on this. Okay, uh, so when it comes to the web technology, okay, we understand that the primary need for the cloud to exist or else to work with the cloud is the internet, isn't it? Okay, and definitely we will be working through the web-based communications only. We have the applications also developed on web-based development only. That is like services, whatever services we were calling, especially in the form of SaaS. Okay, whatever the services that were developed are entirely the web-based. That means out and out internet communication you will be observing through the web content or else web-based communications only. Okay, so you have to understand what and all the basic technologies of the web that comes here in this part. Okay, so first and foremost thing is like very primitive thing, probably URL. That is nothing but the link in a common man language, what we often name it as a link. Okay, in other sense it is called as a uniform resource locator, which is a kind of syntax, okay, for identifying certain server or else certain entity in the network. Uniform resource locator. Okay, and the other one is how once you identify this your the communication location. Okay, how do you extend that communication? How do you extend that communication? How do you exchange the data? And you make use of certain protocols, isn't it, right? So the primary protocol here in the web technology which will be used is, again, as you people know, HTTP. Most of the times, okay, we get this HTTP links. Okay, and of course nowadays you will be coming across secured HTTP. That is nothing but HTTPS as well. Okay, so these are the communication protocols basically, isn't it, right? So through which the communication can be happening between two entities in the internet. And how the data will be presented, how the data will be presented, or as how the data will be traveled through this HTTP protocol to the to the identified URL. I mean to say, to the identified uniform resource locator. Okay, so how on what basis that particular data will be rendered. Okay, so markup languages are the means that help the data to render properly on the web page. Okay, again, coming to the markup language, you can come across both HTML and XML. Okay, so HTML is a very very primitive one for presentation of web pages, and on the other hand, XML is little bit higher end kind of thing, where you can have multiple functions being attained, or else multiple usage you can be digging out of the XML. Okay, probably you can tell that you can define a vocabulary entirely. Okay, which is associated with the web pages, which is associated with the web pages. Like you can come up with a schema, or else you can come up with a presentation, or else you can come up with a communication entity. Anything you can. Okay, you can name that. So that's the reason we call it as just an any vocabulary that is needed for the web can be defined using the XML. So these are the two markup languages we usually. Okay, so everyone knows when 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 asked about the basics of the web technology, these four is mandatory. Like, you have to identify the URL, where it has to go, okay, and how it has to go through the protocol, that is HTTP, what it has to carry, that is nothing but the data in terms of the markup language, isn't it, right? So what we understand here is web is entirely supported with a distributed way of web applications. Distributed way of applications. What I mean is all the web applications are being developed using the distributed architecture. Here you can see that the entire functions or else entire processing of the functions can be divided into two areas. One is client end and another one is server end. Usually the server part will be on the cloud, okay, and the client end will be, of course, they can be accessible from anywhere, like from even the browser, as these are lightweight applications, okay, you can access them even from the browsers, isn't it? Okay, so that end user can be accessing the servers either in the cloud or from the outside of the cloud, provided there are certain access privileges. Okay, now you can have it out how this client and server part have been divided, how the client part and server part have been divided. Okay, so client part is the one that usually talks to the end user, and it collects the data what end user is interested about. Okay, so it is well framed, and it is well shown, or else well what to say, well presented entities will be there in the clientele part, and whatever the data that will be received from the client, okay, it is considered as the request has been raised. Okay, so these requests will be sent to the second part of the application, that is nothing but the server part. Okay, the server part, when the when it receives the requests, okay, what has to be done for that request, what has to be done for that request will be identified, and successfully does that particular activity and sent back to the client as a response. All these three things will be done at the server end. Okay, now let us not worry what is that kind of activity, but definitely uh, whatever is the activity that is being given back as a response to the request, okay, it has to be like pre identified, and it requires necessary data, or else necessary or else relevant information for processing that particular request. Say for example, if I have a database is there, and there are multiple users, okay, and probably one user will be having admin role and another user will be having just a user role. Okay, now being a user role, I cannot raise a request that usually admin raises. Though if I try to rise, okay, server will not respond accordingly. Server will say, no, you don't have privileges, or else you don't have such rights, something like that. Okay? So this is how very clearly, very discreetly, okay, the functionalities have been defined and developed in such a way that client and servers will be will be bounded to work on their identified and defined activities only. Okay, now in the protocol layer, you can see at the presentation layer itself, okay, uh, the division of the web and the server client will be happening, and a few components of presentation layer will be towards the web client, and a few will be towards the server. That means a few actually the presentation layer is the one that identifies whether this has to be going to the client or this has to be going to the server. Likewise, okay, so it will identify if one particular activity is being identified at the presentation layer, then it decides whether the response for this particular request should be prepared on the client side or on the server side. One example I would like to give: when you are filling the form, okay, you might come across certain fields which are marked as mandatory fields, isn't it? Okay. Now, if you don't fill relevant data into that field and still try to submit the form, okay, it doesn't allow. Immediately, it prompts you that there are few mandatory fields and you got to submit, you got to enter the data. So again, it is a request and response has happened over there. What is the request? user has entered certain data and he wanted to submit it. So that is the request. He requested to submit my data. But what is the response? As part of the response, okay, the application needs much more information, which is a mandatory information again, and it is found that user is missing that information, isn't it, right? So that is the response. So immediately the system asks for that mandatory information. So that is what you call it as a response, isn't it, right? So who gives this response? Who gives this response? Usually when all this request will be going to the server, and it has to in the server it will be identifying that sufficient amount of information was not part of the request, and hence it bounces back. And hence it bounces back from the server to the client. Okay, so to reduce the work, okay, certain operations or certain activities are being defined on the clientele end itself. Okay, so in the clientele end, what happens is these kind of validations, these kind of minimal level of verifications will be done at the client end itself, and immediately when the end user tries to submit the data without mandatory information being filled, okay, immediately the browser itself, indicates that there are few mandatory fields. Okay, so that means that response is not gone to the server, but this response is being prepared at the client end itself. Okay, but on the other hand, when you submit the data and when you want to retrieve the data, then all the way the request will be moving from client end to the server's end, and then the server has to process it and send the response back. You got it? Okay, so that is what the client end and the server end will be pre-identified with their own activities, and all these activities will be defined as decided by the presentation layer. Okay, so this is about the web technology, very simplistic thing. Okay, whatever is the request that is being raised, it will be sent to either the client, it will be entertained either at the client end, or it will be sent back to the server end. That is what we have to understand. Okay, now moving on to the next technological component which is enabling the cloud is multi-tenant technology. Multi-tenant technology, it means that there is one resource and multiple users are accessing that resource at the same time. Simultaneously they are trying to access. They are trying to access. It is something like exactly, if I would like to quote an example, uh, have you seen the movie Avunu Validrishtapaddaru? In the same house both hero and heroine will be staying. Of course, let's not worry about how they stay and other things. Okay, so daytime the hero will be staying and nighttime the heroine will be staying. That means the resource is one and the same, house is one and the same, but there are two tenants for it. There are two tenants for it, isn't it, right? So both the tenants are accessing the same resources. Okay, so similar to that of, okay, when you have certain cloud resources, okay, multiple customers are liable to use that resource simultaneously. Definitely simultaneously I'll be using upon it. And while using such thing, okay, each tenant will be having their own privileges and their own way of resource consumption. Their own way of resource consumption. Okay, nowhere the data of one tenant will be overlapped with the others, or else the security features of one tenant will be overlapping with the others. These things will not be happening entirely. Okay, so such kind of things are taken care altogether. Okay, that's it. That's about the multi-tenant technology. Okay, like we were talking, like, when multiple users or else multiple clients are consuming the IT resources, there should not be any disturbance between their consumption, and they should not have any problem, or else they should not feel that, okay, my resource is being shared with others. That's the beauty of the cloud. That's the beauty of the cloud. Okay, while doing so, okay, the multi-tenants applications have to very much ensure that tenants have access to their data only, and their data, or else their application configuration will be according to their specifications only, and those configurations will not be shared as well. Okay, they will not be shared as well. On the other hand, tenants can go and change a few kind of things for the benefit of the application, like they can control upon the resource, how it can be consumed at the interface level, that is at the user interface level. They can control upon the business process. They can control upon the data models, and also the access control. One example I would like to give is, you would have come across the ATMs, isn't it? ATM machines. Okay, so ATM manufacturers are very limited in number. ATM manufacturers are very limited in number. So there will be multiple clients of banks who will be approaching these manufacturers, and they will be purchasing their ATM machines, and they'll be running their softwares on it. Okay. Now let us assume that there is an Diebold manufacturer, and he has been approached by Andhra Bank or any other, like Canara Bank, or okay, let us take these two banks. So these two banks have approached them, and they have raised their interest in choosing their ATM machines. Okay, so ATM machines will be one and the same. Their structure, their size might be one and the same, but their appearance might be different. Probably, Andhra Bank guy would like to have the card insertion area on the right corner, but on the other hand, probably on a Canara Bank user might show interest to have that card insertion area on the left-hand side. So that is a kind of user interface customization. How the user would like to interact, and at the same time, the keys, the keypad, the size of the keys or the keypad can go the customization. They can feel that that sort of customization easily. Okay, that is to the user interface level. Now, if I start using the functionality of that particular ATM, okay, few ATMs, okay, especially if you come across SBI ATMs, okay, when you insert the card and when you are about to start the transaction, that ATM asks you to enter any two digits and verify whether the entered digits are correctly displayed or not. So this is one particular business process. Okay, so there is a logic behind that adapting to that particular process, ensuring that whatever the communication that is happening between the ATM machine and the user is appropriate. So that sort of validation is being done through that particular step. So if SBI Bank adopts to that, okay, whether the manufacturing ATM is Diebold or Huawei or any other thing, okay, so they have to definitely adopt to this particular process. But at the same time, when the same manufacturer is catering the devices to other bankers, okay, it is not necessary for them to follow the similar kind of things. They can go for some other process, and a few other of course, there is one more feasibility also. When you insert the card until the transaction is complete, you cannot eject the card. Of course, now it has made mandatory to keep the card in the ATM itself till the transaction is complete. Okay, but few years back that was not the case. Few years that was back that was not the case. We can just insert and we can just validate, and you can take off the card. Further, the transaction will be continued, but a few items will be mandatorily insisting that the card should be present. Okay, so these are all the kind of business process which can be adopted. Okay, but still you could find that, okay, the resource is one and the same, but your way of functioning onto it is a different one. You got it? Okay, and the coming onto the data model, how the data will be stored, how the data has to be stored. Probably few banks might be asking, in the transaction slip that is being generated. Okay, few will be showing the remaining balance. Okay, and few items will be showing the ledger balance and available balance, and few items will not show the balance at all. So it's a kind of the customization that is happening, how the data has to be presented also, isn't it, right? So they can have however the client requires. In the similar sense, okay, the tenant multi-tenant technology ensures that all the clients are being satisfied when they are accessing on a same resource again. So more or less, we can also talk similar kind of examples with the access control. So who can access the control? More privileges. or else who has the access to the data at certain levels of the hierarchy. Likewise, you can control upon the data, you can control upon the access, you can control upon the business process, you can control upon the user interface. All these things you can do definitely. Okay, so that's about the multi-tenant technology, and most importantly, you could see that if you predefined characteristics have been identified for the multi-tenant technologies. Okay, that means if you have these characters, you can name that. Okay, this application can be falling under multi-tenant applications. You can be identifying it as a multi-tenant applications. Okay, so let's see about those characteristic features. Okay, one is the usage isolation. That means the behavior of one tenant does not affect the behavior of other applications when the other tenants are using. It is something like you have a huge complex of house where let us assume there are 6 to 10 portions. Say let us say 6 portions are there, and that is the one single resource. So a single resource. Okay, one building, 6 tenants are there, so 6 people are being residing in that building. Okay, and each one has their own way of living, and each one has their privacy, isn't it? So that is what is usage isolation. Okay, so the person who is living in portion 1 will not be disturbing the one who is residing in his neighborhood, or else he might not be disturbing the one who is residing in portion number 6 or portion number 5. Likewise. Okay, so they have their own privacy, and also they have their own security, they have their own way of looking into that particular resource. Okay, that's about the usage isolation. Second characteristic is the data security. Each persons will be having their own way of securizing their data. Like coming back to the same houses example, one person might be locking their home with say 7 levers lock, and other one might be going with a digital lock, other one might be going with just a 3 levered lock or something like that. Okay, so they have their own way of measuring and taking care of their data preservation, isn't it? Right, so that's about the data security characteristic feature. Coming on to the third one, the recovery. When certain backups and restoration process are happening, each one will be having their own adaptive processes. Each one will be having their own adaptive processes. Why? Because few people might be they expect their backups to happen daily, or else depending upon the business and depending upon the application again. Okay, so their restoration of the data, you know depending upon the backups. Okay, it it it, it has their own way of uh, you know uh, backing up their data and the restoration of data. That's what is all about the recovery. Okay, so and the other one is application grades. Even I can see many people nowadays, even in the mobile. Okay, so they would like to upgrade few applications, but not all the applications. So they still the Play Store, or else still that the respective software will be prompting for update. Okay, people will not be showing much interest until unless they have plentiful data that is expiring. You got it. Okay, so that's the kind of application updates. Even the same applications are being consumed by multiple tenants. Okay, the versioning of that application might be different, the versions of application might be different. And also coming onto the scalability factors. Okay, so how the resource consumption can be happening, either you can underuse or you can overuse depending upon your business need basically. Okay, and again the kind of metered usage, isn't it? Like it doesn't mean that 6 portions have been shared and the owner will be receiving same kind of rent. It depends. Okay, if the first portion is little bit larger, or else if it is a 3 bedroom house, okay, he will be charged different. And some other portion, like if it is a 2 bedroom portion, that will be charged in a different rate. Okay, so that means the kind of resource consumption is being measured, and that has to be metered. That's what. Okay, so all the usage that is happening should be measurable. And data tier isolation, this is very crucially important. Okay, it is something like the parking space. It is something like the parking space. Okay, so in that parking space, either you can park your car, or you can park your bike, or you can lend it to outside people. So similarly, you have your own way of arranging the data. You have your way of arranging the data. Or else in another example I can be telling, entire houses are one of the same size of hall, same size of rooms are there, but the arrangement of the things inside the house might be different. Say probably I would like to see the television framed on the wall that is on the south, and probably other person uh, might be interested to frame the television on the wall that is on the east side. We cannot tell them. We cannot identify them. Okay, but especially the usage is there, but in their own way. But in their own way. That's what we call it as a data type isolation. Often, people mistaken that multi-tenancy is nothing but the virtualization. Multi-tenancy is nothing but the virtualization. Or else people think that, okay, I'm using virtualization, and hence I am also I can be also called as the multi-tenants, or as uh, multi-tenancy I'm being followed. Often people do this confucius activity, but remember, virtualization is far different from multi-tenancy. In multi-tenancy, what happens is the single resource is being consumed by multiple tenants. But in the virtualization, the single resource is being virtualized first and then starts the consumption. But here in the multi-tenant technology, you can never find creation of another resource over there. You can just find a resource, that is it. But the replication of that resource is not found, or else the virtualization of that resource is not found. It is something like, for your account, okay, you can create multiple virtual cards, virtual access cards. I mean to say, like virtual credit card, virtual debit card. Likewise, you can create them, but account should be one and the same. Account should be one and the same. So that is what is the difference between multi-tenancy and the virtualization. You very often, people fail to distinguish where the multi-tenancy is stopping and from where the virtualization is happening. That's technically speaking, you cannot identify this technical difference being a end user, being a client. You cannot be observing it. You could be observing this difference if you are a resource administrator only. And if you are an architect, if you are a product architect, then you could definitely identify where exactly, or else what kind of technology is being happening in the cloud. Why? Because in the cloud, both virtualization and multi-tenancy both are allowed, both are supportive. You got it? Both are supported. But when you are receiving some sort of benefit, you are not able to properly distinguish whether that support is being received by because of the virtualization or because of the multi-tenants. That's this is a little bit of uh, problematic. Why? I will tell you. If you don't have this discrimination properly, then when you are planning for running into an agreement with the that is SLA, when you are trying to come up with an SLA, then you will not be having that SLA according to your specifications, or else you will be ending up with paying more and more amount. So that's how it goes. That's how it goes. Okay. So that's the reason as a cloud administrator, or else as a cloud resource person, or else as a product architect, or else as any development product architect, okay, you should be clearly identifying how these resources are to be consumed, whether these are to be consumed in the form of virtualization technology, or they can adopt to the multi-tenant technology. Okay. Very much concepts might be similar, consumption might be similar, but still the kind of access is being provided with the virtual objects in the virtualization, and that's not happening. That's not going to happen with the multi-tenancy. The same resource is being shared. Same resource is being shared. You got it? Okay. So that's about the multi-tenancy technology.